Remember, remind, recall, and recollect. These words are pretty confusing to people. So in this video, we will talk about these words and how to use them in sentences. So let's first talk about remember. If you remember something, it means you bring it to your mind or you think of it. If it is a past experience, you bring it back to your mind, and if it's something in the future, then you keep that in mind. It's basically the opposite of forget. You can simply say that remember means to not forget. For example, I remember that I left the light on. I remember that I left the light on. Or you can say, I remember him from last night. I remember him from last night. Now let's look at a few sentence structures that you use while using the word remember in a sentence. The first one is remember with an object. For example, I can't remember the last time I met her. I can't remember the last time I met her. Now, the part of the sentence that follows the word remember is actually the object in the sentence. Let's take another example. I remembered him, but he didn't remember me. I remembered him, but he didn't remember me. Now, him is a pronoun, but in this sentence, it's used as an object. Why don't we take another example? Let's say, I can't remember the name of this place. I can't remember the name of this place. Now the next sentence structure for remember is remember along with a question word or a that clause. Now we all know what a question word is from our previous videos, but that clause is actually a clause that begins with that. Let's take examples. Do you remember what it looks like? Do you remember what it looks like? Or I remember that it looked old and rusty. I remember that it looked old and rusty. Now the next sentence structure for remember is remember along with verb plus ing. That is the gerund form of the verb. Now this sentence structure is actually used to describe something very specific that actually happened in the past. That is to say that remember is followed by gerund while talking about a past action. It actually denotes a past action, an action that has already been completed. You know, when you have a memory of something that happened or something you did in the past. Let's take some example sentences so you know how to use them in sentence. For example, she remembered seeing him last night. She remembered seeing him last night. Or, I remember brushing my teeth after dinner. I remember brushing my teeth after dinner. Or, I remember going there last summer. I remember going there last summer. Now all these aforementioned example sentences actually describe actions that have already been completed in the past. So always remember guys, remember with gerunds always denote past actions. Another sentence structure for remember is remember along with two infinitives. Now this is a special case that is used while talking about something in the future. It denotes a future action. You know, when you remember to do something. Let's take some examples. Remember to save your file before you exit the program. Remember to save your file before you exit the program. Or remember to take your medicine on time. Remember to take your medicine on time. Or you can say, you must remember to go shopping before the festivals. You must remember to go shopping before the festivals. Now all these sentences refer to future actions, actions that you haven't done yet, actions that you are yet to do. That was all about remember. Now let's talk about remind. Now remind means to make someone think about something, to make someone remember. You kind of help them not to forget it. For example, the party reminded me of my school days. The party reminded me of my school days. Now one thing you must remember is that remind is always followed by a noun. That noun is always a person. I mean, you remind someone about something, right? That is why remind is always followed by a person. For example, she reminded me to pick her up from work. She reminded me to pick her up from work. Now let's take a look at some sentence structures that you use while using the word remind. The first one is remind along with an object which is actually a noun, you know, a person, followed by a question word or a that clause. For example, she reminded me what to do after lunch. She reminded me what to do after lunch. Or the ad reminded me that I have to buy some coffee. The ad reminded me that I have to buy some coffee. Or he needs someone to remind him that there's more to life than work. He needs someone to remind him that there is more to life than work. The next sentence structure for remind is remind with an object, the noun or the person, followed by two infinitives. These kind of sentences are used to spark a memory, to remind you that there is a task that you need to complete. It's actually a verb. That's why the sentence structure includes two infinitives. For example, I have an app that reminds me to drink water. I have an app that reminds me to drink water. Or, she reminded me to take the umbrella. She reminded me to take the umbrella. The next sentence structure for remind is remind with an object, then the preposition of, along with a noun. Now this sentence structure is used when someone or something makes you think of someone or something else. You can say that there is a big resemblance. Both the things are very similar and one reminds you of another. For example, the song reminded me of someone I used to know in college. The song reminded me of someone I used to know in college. For resemblance, you can say, she reminded me of my mother. She reminded me of my mother. There are two more words that are kind of in the same vicinity as remember and remind. They are recall and recollect. Recall means to think actively, to try and remember. And recollect means to make conscious efforts to bring something back to your mind, to a level of awareness, to not only remember but understand the things that happened. Now I know they kind of sound very similar to the meaning of remember and it's very confusing. But at the end of this video, I will give you an example and I hope you understand the difference. But first, let's take a look at the sentence structures that both these words follow. The first sentence structure is both recall and recollect can be followed by a question word or a that clause. For example, he doesn't recall where he left his keys. He doesn't recall where he left his keys. But later he recollected that he had them in his pocket. But later he recollected that he had them in his pocket. The next sentence structure is both recall and recollect can be followed by gerunds. For example, do you recall watching a movie last night? Do you recall watching a movie last night? Now, one small thing to take a note here is that recollect also means to be composed, to calm down, to gather your thoughts. For example, make sure you have some personal time to unwind and recollect your thoughts. Make sure you have some personal time to unwind and recollect your thoughts. After watching this video till now, if you still have your doubts, then let me clarify it once again. Remember refers to bringing a memory back to your mind, a memory that is already available, something that you have already experienced. But you use recall when you are trying to think of something. You may not necessarily have the memory, but you are trying to think if you have it. It actually denotes to an inorganized and random thought process. But recollect refers to making a conscious effort to recall something. And not just recall it, but try and understand it, to try and put it together. Now, after all this explanation, let me break your heart and tell you that all these words are actually interchangeable. In fact, nowadays, recall and recollect are hardly ever used. You can always use remember as a substitute. Anyway, I told you before in this video that I would give you an example, something that will help you understand better. So, let's take that example. I remember the concert clearly, but I can't recollect why I decided to go there. I have been trying to recall, but all in vain. But this morning, my friend called and reminded me that I went to see her. This video has turned out to be pretty long, but I still have two more words related to memory. Now, no more examples, just words. The first word is reminisce. It is a verb and it means to indulge in enjoyable recollection of past events. Basically, it means that you want to live those past moments again. The second word is memorize. It is again a verb and it means to commit to memory, to learn by heart. So that's it for today, guys. This was a pretty long video and we talked about quite a few things in this video. So if you found this helpful, if you think that you learned something from this video, then give it a like and subscribe to my channel. That would be amazing. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.